You know, s- the old stories still work, not because they've lasted, but because they move. Something inside of them still listens, something deeper than memory, beneath the language, beneath the plot. That's where the pattern lives. Now, these stories aren't static. They're symbolic, they're structural, they're movable. And they don't just describe experience, they create it. And when you know how to listen, really listen, you start to feel the rhythm that's always been there right beneath the surface. You begin to sense the pacing inside of your own body, the shifts, the gaps, the decisions that arrive before you've even thought to decide. Stories do that, and the good ones always have. Now, today I'm going to tell you a story about Goldilocks, not the one you remember, and not just once. I'm going to tell it in three ways, each with its own rhythm, its own structure, and one that blends them both. And just notice which version feels closest for you, or maybe notice how something inside of you moves between them. The story might shift, and you might too. Now, she didn't mean to be in the woods. The morning started like all others, half decided, half awake, and she had planned to begin something, anything. But starting required clarity, and that was still somewhere else. So she walked instead, not with purpose, but to quiet the hum of delay. Her feet moved without coordination, shoelaces untied, thoughts undone. The trail didn't appear, it had always been there, just to the left of what she usually chose to notice. Now, she might have turned back or told herself there were better things to do, dishes or maybe inboxes, but the guilt didn't feel clean. It was the kind that loops, not lives. And by the time she realized her direction had changed, the trees had thinned, a small house leaned forward like it had been waiting. She didn't decide to enter. She realized she already had. Now, the first chair had corners that bit. It sat like authority, like effort was owned, not offered. And she tried to match its postures, spine straight, clenched jaw, command ready. And it echoed that voice she knew too well. Just do it already. She lasted a breath or two before her body told the truth. That wasn't it. Now, the second chair welcomed almost too much. It absorbed her. Her spine vanished, the edges erased. And at first, she liked it. And then she forgot she was in it. Then she forgot why she came. Comfort dulled her into a fog, and the stillness grew thick. She pulled herself out, not startled, but disappointed. And the third one didn't say much. It didn't need to. It just met her exactly where she sat. No judgment, no invitation, just presence. And she leaned and it held, not perfectly, but with rhythm. And that rhythm wasn't demanding, it was already moving. She didn't think, she followed. The three bowls that sat on the counter, each with its own story. The first radiated heat, sharp, urgent. You're late, you're behind, hurry up. One bite and her stomach twisted. The second was lifeless, distant, cool enough to numb her mouth, but not her mind. She pushed it away. And the third was uneven, still steaming, a bit lumpy, but it smelled like something once cared for. She took 3 bites, maybe 4, not to finish, but to stop the not doing. Now, later, she realized how tired she had become, not from effort, but from holding back. The first bed taught lessons with its stiffness. Her ribs wouldn't relax. The second erased her outline. Too soft, too much. And the third, it caught her without claiming her. Her breath deepened, limbs released. She didn't sleep. She landed. The air outside the house had changed, as if something had finished, not the work, but the waiting. She didn't linger. She didn't need the house to explain herself. She just sat, moved, eaten, and let her bones remember how to rest. She walked out without hesitation, not because the story told her to, because her body had already decided. The path wasn't new, but she was. And the road didn't wait for her to lead. It moved with her. She hadn't created anything in days. The silence around her wasn't peace. It felt swollen, like something inside of her had been building. Not panic, not urgency, just a quiet tension of too many unmade decisions pressed against her ribs. She left the house without correcting her appearance, brushed past the door like it might hold her back if she looked too long. The forest wasn't calling, it was waiting, and that waiting made her start walking. No destination had been named, but her body felt the need for a turning point, not forward motion for the sake of escape, but for reentry. When the clearing emerged, framed by the trees she hadn't noticed until now, her steps aligned, and there was a small house tucked into the shape of the light. It looked like a decision, like something with edges. Her hand moved up before her thoughts caught up. One chair stood with expectation carved into its form. She sat and felt her spine stretch and then tighten. It wasn't discipline, it was judgment disguised as posture. Like sitting straight, she could make herself worthy again. It felt like all the jobs she'd outgrown, all the standards that never softened. She rose, not in protest, but in clarity. Now the next one seduced, plush, familiar. She gave in to it easily, letting herself dissolve across the surface. But that surrender didn't feel clean. It numbed her ambition. It took something that she hadn't meant to give. Softness without a reason to rise became a trap. So she pulled herself up, breath tight, but honest. It's not what she needed. Now, there was no applause in the third chair, no promises. It adjusted when she did. When her weight leaned, it leaned back. When her breath deepened, it held. She didn't sink. She didn't resist. They aligned. Now, the fit wasn't perfect, but it was present, and that was enough. Then she moved toward the bowls, not to eat, but to understand. The first burned and tasted like deadlines and guilt and a reminder of her days where she survived without feeling nourished. The second didn't even register. It passed through her mouth like an obligation. But the third, it surprised her, warm, uneven, faintly familiar. It reminded her of mornings she used to make space for herself. She stopped eating before she was full because something deeper had been fed. Now, after the taste faded and stillness arrived, not fatigue, resolution. Her body had a question it wanted answers, and the beds became the reply. Now, the first taught a lesson of hardness. Her shoulders never settled. The second erased her outline, softness without form. And the third, subtle, held, present, caught her breath in mid-drop. She didn't fall asleep. She found her shape again. And something shifted in the space around her, not a sound, sensing, as if the house had witnessed her return to herself and had nothing left to offer. No reward, no insight, just recognition. She stood and crossed the threshold without cataloging the change. There's no need to explain it to herself, no desire to hold on to the story. The door didn't open. She did. Not to reach a destination, but to continue what had already begun. The morning had that loose, uncertain feel, no pressure, no momentum, just a vague knowing that something might begin or might not. She slipped out without checking the time, half-zip jacket, shoes missing a loop, details she noticed but didn't correct. And the trees ahead, they didn't call, they allowed. So she walked, not from urgency, not from curiosity, just enough to interrupt the stillness that she'd been sitting in for far too long. There was no plan, and that had become the plan. But lately, absence had started to ache, not a scream, attention, familiar, that kind that builds until the body makes a decision for you. When the trees thinned and the clearing widened, she didn't need permission. She walked toward the small house, not to explore, but because the pause inside her had stretched past its edge. Something in her needed to move, and the door was already open. One chair stood like it had something to prove. Straight back, stern, she sat and tried to match its posture, but the longer she held the shape, the more it pushed back, like it was measuring her and finding her lacking. That kind of judgment didn't feel motivating. It felt familiar, too familiar. And she stood without apology, and something in her spine loosened. The next chair was seductive, soft, overstuffed, so accommodating it erased any need to choose anything at all. She sank and just kept sinking down. Muscles went slack, breath grew shallow, memory blurred at the edges. It was comfort, yeah. The kind of comfort that made her forget why she came. She rose slowly, brushing off the sleep that wasn't rest, and didn't look back. Now the third chair waited, plain, unassuming. It didn't try to impress. It didn't collapse. She shifted her weight, and it shifted back, like they were adjusting to each other. Nothing profound happened, but it felt like something would if she stayed. She didn't wait for that moment to arrive. She stood again, and that, more than anything, felt like progress. The bowls lined the counter, already steaming. She tasted the first one out of duty. It scorched the back of her tongue, reminding her of deadlines and expectations. She tasted the second because habit told her she should. It landed like air. Then the third, just warm enough, just messy enough. It didn't impress. It met her where she was. The flavor did not change her life, but she stopped feeling hungry. Movement stalled again after the last bite. For a flicker of a moment, she nearly turned back, almost left the way that she came, thinking she had done enough. But her body didn't agree. It had already begun leaning forward. Now she found the beds without needing to, not out of exhaustion, but readiness. The first offered structure without relief, and her ribs stayed locked. The second, shapeless, swallowing her in a way that made her feel untethered. But the third had a quiet geometry to it. She laid down, not to sleep, but to arrive. Her breath didn't deepen because she tried. It did because she stopped trying. Something shifted in the room, not a sound, a recognition. And like the space itself had noticed her change before she had. It didn't speak. It simply let her feel seen. She stepped through the door with nothing left to analyze, no insights to journal, no questions to resolve. The house hadn't given her anything, but it had revealed what she already carried, and she moved forward, not lighter because something had been released, but because something had aligned. So later, when you're doing something ordinary, walking across the room, reaching for a handle, tasting something just warm enough to notice, some part of you will move again. Not because you're thinking about the story, or not because you remembered the chairs or the bowls or the beds, but because the right rhythm has already found its place inside of you.